can tell you the same, that this church and your pastor have occupied a kind of outsized place in our lives, in our conversations for our whole lives. And the reason is this, and someday if I get more time, I'll write a book about this. So my brother and I grew up in a place, as I said, only 1,000 or so miles, but really light years from here culturally. And the Bakers were our cousins. And we always loved them because they are the kindest people we ever knew. But we always noticed the profound differences between the way they lived and the way we lived. They were Baptists. We were Episcopalians. They didn't drink. We drank avidly. They said prayers before every meal. We were mildly embarrassed by this. Every Christmas, Carla would send me presents, really nice presents, and in the card she would always write, underlined with a heart, she would say, "Jesus loves you." And I always wondered, what does Jesus have to do with Christmas? Like, I'm not against that, but, what's the connection? And I have to say, the reason that the Bakers, with every passing year, occupy a larger portion of space in my head and my heart is because they were right. They were 100% right. And their lives have borne that out. I just had breakfast, as I do. I try to at least once a year with my cousin Jason, who I can, since I'm nearsighted, so I can tell he's here. He's enormous, so you can't miss him if he is. But every time I do, I always call my wife and I always say, I should have lived like that my whole life. So 40 years later, I pray over meals. And actually, I don't drink, to be totally blunt about it. And I finally figured out the connection between Jesus and Christmas. There is a link. And so I guess the point I'm making is, I have always been resistant to words as a word person. Right? If you talk to anybody who sells cars, they're very suspicious that the car might actually be a lemon, because they spend a lot of time selling lemons. And if you're in the word business like I am, in the end, you recognize the power of words, but you also develop a distrust of words because you know how cheap they are. They're free, in fact. And so what you really begin to trust is the results, the fruit. What happens over time to people when they believe certain things and live certain ways. I believe this is a biblical principle. It's certainly the principle I see living in the products of Second Baptist, the Baker family. So I just wanted to tell you that it's sort of a heavy moment for me to be here, and I'm really grateful. So I'm still so rooted in my Episcopalian tradition that I'm wearing a stupid necktie, as you can see, and I'm too embarrassed to raise my hands. And I'm also, I'm very uncomfortable giving explicit political thoughts in church. I was raised not to do that, and by the way, I'm not qualified. I'm not a theologian, I'm a talk show host, I probably shouldn't be here in the first place. So rather than tell you or suggest who you ought to vote for, which would be insulting and wrong, let me just give you some guideposts from the world that I live in, which is the political world, to help you understand what you're hearing. I think this is a particularly confusing time. Not simply because unexpected things are happening, that's kind of the rule of life. We imagine as people, this is baked into us for some reason, that tomorrow will be a pure extrapolation from today, that current trends will continue. And that's never true. Completely unexpected things happen. People die. People who weren't even in politics 20 minutes ago are elected president. Things happen that no one foresaw. So that's not what's confusing about this moment. What's confusing is that things have changed so much and so fast that a lot of us, especially those of us over 40, have not updated our assumptions about what we're hearing. So let me tell you the assumption that has been overturned in my life over the past 2 years. And that is that I am having a political debate every night. Now, this is my 22nd year of having debates on television. So it's basically all I've ever done. I've never really had a legitimate job. My whole life has been sitting across from someone arguing about whatever the news of the day is. And I have always come at this from a very conventional and deeply American viewpoint, which is this. We have differences. You think one thing, I think another. Let's each state what we believe and try to convince the other one to come over to our side. I know this sounds crazy, but this is what we've been doing for about 250 years, and it's worked pretty well. And in the service of whatever argument we're making, we marshal facts and ideas, and we try to hone our explanation in a way that makes it more pervasive and persuasive, etc. May the best man win. That's kind of the assumption I go into this with. And by the way, I haven't always won. I've lost all kinds of debates, and sometimes I've lost and it's had the kind of amazing and very welcome effect of changing my mind. I had a dumb opinion. I was crushed by a better opinion. I assumed the new opinion. It's one of the happiest things that can happen to you, actually, when you get older, is having the experience of learning something new. It doesn't happen enough. In the last 2 years, however, I've noticed that I'm the only person in the conversation with these assumptions. So I'm kind of, I never consider myself a genius, but I'm slightly dumber than I thought I was. Because I'm going into this every night, like Lucy with the football, expecting it's going to be there when I kick, and every time I wind up on my backside, because it gets yanked away every night, and I never learn that what looks like a political debate is not at all. The other side is approaching this as a theological debate, which is to say not a debate at all. So just to go back to something that your pastor said a second ago, churches are often criticized for allowing politics inside the sanctuary. Too rarely, I think, do we criticize politicians for allowing religion into political discourse. Because make no mistake, what you are watching is a religious debate. Now this is hard for Christians because they imagine that a religion, by definition, must center on God. The word religion is an acknowledgement that there's something more powerful than you. This is the assumption that all Christians have. And by the way, let me just say parenthetically, I think most Christians, like me, are sympathetic to that, even if it's a faith they don't share. Because really the dividing line in the world is not simply between those who have our faith, but between all people of faith and people who have no faith, okay? I think most people sort of feel that way. You can respect reverence even if you don't share belief in the deity being revered, if you see what I'm saying. You can see a faithful Hasidic Jew and say, I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I respect that in a way, even if I don't believe it. What we're not prepared for is what's happening now, which is an argument against religious people who do not believe in God. That does not make them less religious. In fact, in some sense, it makes them even more fervent in their religion. So this has taken me, as I said, 2 years to figure out. But here's how it plays out in my life. I will be having a conversation about a topic, pick a topic. It almost doesn't matter. And I will realize midway through the course of the kind of Socratic questions that I attempt, as your pastor described, a series of dumb questions, by the way, which are always the most evocative. The dumber the question, the deeper it penetrates, I have found. Also, that's kind of what I'm capable of, so I'm going with it. I will realize midway through that there is no question that I can ask, there is no piece of evidence that I can throw up on the screen that is ever going to change the mind of the person I'm sitting across from. Ever. Well, what does that suggest? It suggests a deep, impenetrable religious faith that nothing I say can pierce. This is someone who's coming at it having already decided, I'm a good person and you're not. I am saved and you are damned. This is happening for a very simple reason. Mainstream, what we used to call mainstream Protestantism, the church that I'm a member of, the Episcopal Church, and many like it, formed for 200 years the basis of the religious belief of America's ruling class. Those churches have collapsed. Nobody goes. Literally, nobody goes. In fact, I spent 4 years living across from an Episcopal cathedral on 46th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue in Manhattan. And one day I went in, I sat down and waited for the service to start, only to realize it had already started and I was the only person in the pews. Literally. The Church of St. Mary on 46th Street. I left because it was terrifying. Because by definition, Christianity requires someone else. The community is essential to the Holy Spirit. Anyway, the point is, that's all gone. But what we're dealing with is a ruling class, the people who are making the overwhelming majority of decisions in our society, not just political, but financial and cultural. People who determine what our economy looks like and determine what your kids watch on television, see at the movies, pull up on the internet. We're dealing with the most powerful people in our society who are essentially secular. But that does not mean they are not people of faith. They are. Because all people are people of faith. It is baked in us. You can take the churches away, you can deny the existence of God, but your religious impulse is with you at birth, and it extends throughout your whole life. Everybody has an inborn need to worship, period. I believe that's proof of the existence of God, by the way, but it doesn't matter what it is, it exists. And so if you're not worshiping at a church or a synagogue, it doesn't mean that your religious impulse is gone. It just means you're transferring it to something else. And for a huge percentage of the people I live around, that impulse has been transferred to politics. And this is why our political debates are so bitter and seem unresolvable. Because they're not rooted in reason. They are rooted in something much deeper, much more ferocious, much more visceral. They're rooted in faith. The problem is they're rooted in a faith that doesn't believe in a higher authority. And that's why this moment has gotten so scary. So let me just outline a few of the differences between this secular faith, which is a faith in the power of man, and the faith that everyone in this room shares, which is Christianity. So the essence of the Christian message is the third hymn tonight, in which hymn, are they called hymns in the Baptist Church? The song. In which the chorus brags about having been in prison and in chains. Think about that. That's not surprising in the Christian context because that is the Christian message. We are fallen. And it's always been one of my favorite things about Christians, even before I fully understand what Christianity was about. I always loved that about them. They knew who they were. They knew how fallen they were. And as a result, they were the mirror image of the Christians that Hollywood was always scaring us with, those judgmental types. They're the least judgmental people I've ever met. Because they didn't imagine themselves to be God. They knew themselves to be broken and in need of God. As my father always used to say, the root of all wisdom is knowing how unimpressive you are. That's not actually the word he used, but I can't use it in church. But whatever, the point is, knowing how fallen you are, knowing that you need help. That's the prerequisite for faith, is asking for it. And no one asks for it before acknowledging that they need it. And you don't know that you need it until you know how totally screwed up you are. So I go to a service like this, where the entire room is singing a song where someone's in effect bragging about what a crummy person he once was. And I think to myself, do any of the people I deal with in Washington, are they even capable of admitting that? No, I'm serious. As you heard your pastor say, they can't admit that 2 + 2 = 4. Now, why would people persist in lying about something so obvious? In telling a lie that they know that you know is a lie, but instead demanding that you believe the lie. Why would they do that? It doesn't enhance them, it makes them look ridiculous. And the answer, of course, is because they have to. If your faith is built on the idea that you are God, you can show no weakness. You can't ever admit that you made a mistake. And you can't forgive anybody else for making a mistake. My wife, who's sitting right there, to whom I've been married for 27 years, very nice person. Daughter of a minister, and has kind of figured out, like I think like a lot of smart women, men are super easy to control. It's super easy to control. And you just got to figure out kind of what their buttons are. And she's figured out with me that I care about her opinion so much that I can't handle direct criticism from her. I spend my whole life being criticized, sometimes fairly, sometimes not. But I actually care what she thinks. So I always say, oh, maybe you don't, just kind of roundabout it for me, and she doesn't. So the only time she ever criticizes me, on the basis of my TV show anyway, is when I come home and when I've gotten mad on TV. She hates that because she thinks it's ugly. And I look foolish and weak when I get mad, and she's right because we all do. So one night I'd gotten mad, someone was just persisting in insisting that 2 + 2 = 6, and it just drove my linear brain to madness, and I barked. And I got home, and she said, my wife Susie said to me, I just want you to know, you're great, you're so great. She prefaces it all with, like, sugar. You're so great, I really thank you for working so hard. doesn't look that good when you behave like a total jerk like you did tonight. So I'd pull back on that a little bit. And maybe you should think about this. You don't need to win every night. You don't need to have the final word. You don't need to render the judgment. None of us do. And I thought, what does that mean? And I've been thinking about it ever since, and that is the essence right there. Christians understand that they don't get to make the judgment, and therefore they don't have to. It's not up to us to decide whether you're going to hell or not. We're not the head of that department. We can only do what we can do. We don't have to judge. It's not incumbent upon us to judge. We can say what we think is true. We can try to direct people in the right direction. We can't make them do anything. Choice, a word that has been totally polluted by Washington, which is a beautiful word. Choice, the freedom to decide to do something or not to do it, that is at the heart of the whole process of becoming a Christian. All of us get to decide, and we get to decide not to if we want. God has given us that power. It's really sort of the core power he's given us. You can deny me if you want. Here's what may happen if you do that. But you still can. Adam and Eve, I'm giving you the choice. You want to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? I wouldn't. But I'm not going to stop you. At the heart of Christian faith is the choice that we allow others to decide what their conscience looks like. This is the thing that is lacking in the secular religion that I, speaking for myself, but I would also implicate you in this, that all of us as people of faith are up against every day. It is not a religion that allows the other side to choose. It is very much like 8th century Islam. It is conversion at the sword. So let me just put it this way. So this is your room. If you're here on Saturday night, you've ticked the faithful Christian box, okay? Kind of by definition. What are you doing here? You believe it enough to come, okay? So I bet you $20 that there is not a single person in this room who will go to bed tonight and after closing his eyes will think, man, I bet there's someone in Williamsburg, Brooklyn right now who disagrees with me. I got to do something about that. Have you ever had that thought before? No, probably not. Your souls are untroubled by the thought that somewhere, somebody doesn't share every single one of your personal beliefs. It's never occurred to you to worry about that because by definition, that's okay. I can promise you that right now, as we speak, somewhere in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, there is a man in black peg jeans and a beard, infuriated that in the depths of Second Baptist in Houston, there is somebody who doesn't share every single one of his views on social issues, and we need to find that person and make him obey. You think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding at all. I'm not kidding at all. If you have a faith without God, without forgiveness, that does not recognize the reality of the human condition, which is that people are inherently from birth flawed, you have a completely different worldview, and you must make certain that everyone shares your faith. Because you're running out of time. Why are you running out of time? Because we all die. The one unchangeable fact of life. And if you don't believe in God, then your time on earth is the only allotted time you have to accomplish your task, which is convert everybody else to what you believe, or else, if you see what I'm saying. So as Christians say, in the end, God's going to make that judgment, and I hope that person changes. The other side will say, because all we can see is all that exists, we've got to force that person to get in line right now. So what are the implications of what I'm saying? The implications are, and this may change, and I sincerely pray to God that it will, but for right now, we are living in an asymmetrical moment where people of faith are by definition, the definition that I just explained, tolerant. It's okay with them to live around people who don't agree with them, even on the big issues, even on the emotional issues. I have very strong feelings about abortion, which I'm not going to bore you with, but you can imagine what they are. And I mean it. I'm not kidding even a tiny bit. But I live next to people who I'm sure disagree with me. I'm capable of liking them. I am. I'm capable of liking them as people, and I do. I think if they knew what I thought, they would not be capable of liking me. And that's kind of the difference right there. So if you imagine that we're going to continue in a world where if you're slightly out of step with what the fashionable people think you can continue to be, you're wrong. You're wrong. Because power, political power, is the point. But this is not true for everyone who votes for that party. It's not. I know a million people who disagree with me politically who are great people, who are better people than I am. So I'm not, but I'm saying the people who are making the decisions have concluded that achieving political power is not a means by which you make something better or allow space for you to build another satellite campus around you. No. It's the point. That is the destination. That's the whole purpose of the exercise. And anything that gets in the way must be destroyed. Must be destroyed. If you felt that somebody or something was threatening one of your kids, what would you do? Maybe a better way to put it would be, what wouldn't you do? And the short answer is nothing. There's nothing you wouldn't do. Threatening one of my children? Are you kidding? If I need to invade your country, if I need to burn your huts and slay your livestock, that's a small price to protect my child. And I think every parent in this room feels the same way. My children? Are you joking? That's much more the way they approach politics. If you want to understand the emotion on the other side that is really not shared by and large, I would say, by people I know, that's where it comes from. The deep rage comes always from one place, a sense of being threatened. This is how you act when you really feel threatened. This is how if someone showed up in my bedroom at night armed, that's how I would feel. That's how I would feel when a lot of my neighbors saw Brett Kavanaugh confirm the Supreme Court and rushed on to the front steps of the building and started beating on the door, and I'm thinking, really? Like, I have a job, I have to go to work. I don't have time to beat on the front door of a federal building. I did, because my mind works differently. My faith is different. That's the point. This is not the argument over the Panama Canal Treaty, okay? Well, I think the Panamanians should get back. No, I don't think so, and here's why. Oh, please. This is a fight that the other side considers existential, which is a sort of crypto-French word that essentially means a fight over existence. They feel that they will be totally disempowered, that their lives will have no meaning if they lose. So I guess what I'm saying is, maybe you're for that, maybe you're not. But I think that you should know it going into these questions, into these elections, and going into whatever comes after this politically. I'm not saying this for any Machiavellian political reason, like, go vote next week, it's so important. That's not the point I'm making at all. I'm merely saying that, unfortunately, it's the last thing I wanted to see happen. Politics really is much more important than it's ever been. Certainly much more important than it should be. But we can't change that, at least right now. We can only acknowledge it and try to understand faithfully what our response to that should be. But don't lie to yourselves. A lot hinges on this. We're not going back to a time where people who strongly disagree with you take power and you still get to do what you want. That's not coming back, at least for now. So keep that in mind. I'll say one last thing. I'm not quite sure how to end a talk in a Baptist church. So I'm going to say something that I've always wanted to say, and I want you to indulge me. And I say this as a lifelong Episcopalian. You ready? Can I get a witness?